So we're going to work through this parable, through this sermon. But as I was preparing for this sermon this past week and a half, I kept thinking, wow, God works in mysterious ways. This is so interesting that this is the first sermon I give after coming back from sabbatical, and I had been actually walking through and living this parable all summer long. I'll explain that. I started my sabbatical by embarking on a 30-day, 450-mile walk across all kinds of paths and soils. I saw all sorts of scenery, and I had time to evaluate the condition of my heart and soul and what kind of soil I am. The walk that I did is called a pilgrimage, and it's called the Camino de Santiago. And it starts in many different places across Europe, but it is common in that it ends in the city of Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain. And this town, Santiago de Compostela, is where the Apostle James's bones are said to be buried. Santiago means Saint James. And so Christians have been traveling to this city for over 1,000 years to make pilgrimage to see where Saint James made it to, since there's record of James and the other disciples going on missionary journeys after Jesus ascended, and that James made it all the way to this Iberian Peninsula. So I had plenty of time on my walk to be thinking about what kind of soil I am. And I wanted to conduct an experiment and see what would happen if during this pilgrimage I quit social media, and if I didn't use my AirPods and I wasn't listening to books or music or podcasts. I wanted to see what would happen if I was just alone with my thoughts as I walked 6 to 12 hours a day. So I want to be clear, this is not a grueling type of hiking adventure like going backpacking in the mountains. I didn't have to pack a cook stove and a tent. I didn't have to bring in all my food. I wasn't dealing with steep elevation changes, but I was dealing with hills, and those are something we don't have here. So what I was doing was more just a really long walk. I would walk from town to town, and I'd stay in basic lodging that is available to pilgrims who are on this path. And I would stay in a room full of bunk beds and have a shared bathroom and wash my clothes by hand and hang it on the line. I would find food each day in grocery stores or markets or cafes along the way. And every morning I'd get up early and I'd walk till I get to the next town, and then I'd find a place to stay and I'd prepare all my stuff, and then the next morning I'd keep walking, and I did that for 30 days straight. Now, the challenge of this type of journey isn't the steep mountain hiking, but it's the solitude and the simplicity, just learning to live with whatever you have on your back for that 30 days, learning how to receive hospitality in these bare bones lodging places that cost from $10 to $30 a night, and then dealing with just being alone with your thoughts. Somebody told me ahead of time that the first week would be physical, the second week would be mental, the third week and beyond would be spiritual. Well, I found every week to be physical, because walking that long, it just is a lot of walking. But at about week 3, it also started to be spiritual. And it also is, that's how long it took me to quiet all of the jumping monkeys in my mind. My mind is normally spinning with many things all at once. And it took a number of weeks to just get to a point where those things weren't spinning anymore, where I could let things go, where I could achieve a point of quiet and solitude. And so without knowing it, I was walking through this parable all summer long, contemplating the kind of soil that I am and that I would like to be. But this parable really isn't about different kinds of soil, but about the different responses we have to the presence of Jesus. Not to spoil this parable for you, but Jesus is the seed. And Diana already shared that with the kids. Jesus is the seed. And at first in this parable, the person who originally sows it is God. God is sowing the seed of Jesus, the word, Jesus, the message, Jesus' presence into this world. Jesus loved to teach using parables. And parable is a word we don't use much outside of church. But parables are stories that teach us often something about ourselves and something about God. Because we can often learn better when we hear a story about it. Stories can catch us off guard, and we can accidentally learn something before we put our guard up and realize that Jesus and the words of Jesus have penetrated into our hearts. Parables lead us to reevaluate what we thought we knew about God and about ourselves. Sometimes I try to fit God into a neat little corner in my life rather than see that my life is actually tucked away into God's bigger plan for this whole world. Parables make God bigger and closer than I and most of us are ever comfortable with. This parable seems straightforward from the beginning. There is seed that is planted, and there are 4 different kinds of soil. The 4 kinds of soil are the hard path, the rocky ground, the thorny patches, and the good, healthy soil. Now, one way to look at this parable would just be able to look at this list of 4 different kinds of soil and figure out which kind we are. Then we'd all realize we're not the good, healthy soil all the time, and then we could just beat ourselves up and feel bad, and that would be the end of it. But that isn't where Jesus wants to leave us. These 4 kinds of soil could also be a self-assessment, kind of an evaluation that we do from time to time, a heart check, to see how we might be responding to God. What are those things in our lives that are hard, that are rocky, that are thorny? What are the things in our lives that we can say goodbye to? How can we welcome the presence of Jesus? The question we can all ask is, what helps or prevents me from seeing and welcoming the presence of Jesus that God plants in our lives? That is a helpful question to visit from time to time. The first kind of soil is that hard path. Now, we can all fill our lives so full that we have no margin for the presence of God. And the word of God just pings against us and flies away because we have made no margin. Then we can also all be the rocky soil from time to time, where we have good intentions and we want to be more spiritual and we want to be better Christians, but there are so many obstacles and struggles in our lives, and our good intentions don't get us anywhere. And we may have had powerful moments of knowing God at work in our lives, but then we don't use any of the supports that we have to help our faith get deeper roots. We don't rely on our faith community. We don't find ways to be in touch with God through Bible study or prayer or all the ways that we can support one another. We can also be like that thorny ground where Jesus says the cares, he said these are the 3 things that can be the thorns in our lives: the cares of the world, the lure of wealth, and the desire for other things. People have always struggled with this. And yet, when I read this list, I think, well, isn't that what my social media feed brings to me nonstop? Now, the internet has just concentrated that as we're looking through our social media, we're seeing the cares of the world, whether it's right next door or on the other side of the world. We're being lured by wealth of, oh, there's so many more things I want and need, and they keep putting ads in my way to tell me my life needs these new, better things. And internet is also just the distraction that adds constant distraction for us to constantly desire more and better and other things. One of the things I did while I was on the pilgrimage is I still had my phone, and I used it as a phone to keep in touch with my family. I used it to take pictures. I used it for the maps and to navigate where I was going. But I removed most of the apps from my home screen so that I didn't even see them every time I opened up my phone to take a picture or to find directions. I just didn't even want to think about those things that weren't directly connected to the pilgrimage. But then we get to the fourth kind of soil, that good, healthy soil that has all the nutrients that it needs. What does good, healthy soil look like? That's a good question. As I was going through this walk and evaluating myself and my heart and being alone with my thoughts for those 30 days, I made a terrible and shocking discovery. I realized that the Mary who ended this walk was the same Mary who started it. At the end of this long pilgrimage, I was still me. In my mind, before I started, I kept envisioning a different kind of Mary that would meet me at the end of my pilgrimage. I thought, oh, that future Mary, that's going to be super Mary. That Mary is going to be wiser. That Mary will be more patient and at ease with everything in that world. That Mary won't have any annoying traits or habits. And also as a bonus, all that walk, I'm going to be so fit. I'm going to look like those Olympians that we all watched just less than a month ago. But at the end of the walk, I showed up in the city of Santiago de Compostela, and I still looked like me. I was still just me. How could this happen? I had done all that work. But yet this parable doesn't just leave us thinking, oh no, we're just a mixed bag of different kinds of soil. No, I still may be just me, but what I also learned is that God is still God. And that's an important thing for us to keep in mind. I may still be that mixed bag where I am open-hearted to God in some ways and closed-hearted in others, and distracted in others. I might be open to God in worship and then closed when someone asks me for help. But that's just me getting stuck on myself. Jesus throws a curveball to us in this parable. While we are stuck figuring out what kind of soil we are, what is God up to? God is the planter. God is the sower. God is the one who keeps on sowing the seed in every growing season. God is the one with generosity sowing all of these seeds, knowing that we are all this kind of soil. God never gives up in planting the presence of Jesus into this world. And that is the gift. As much as I wanted to be a different, better person, what really matters is the kind of God that keeps on seeking me. That we have a God that is constant, that is generous. And God's plan for saving this whole world doesn't depend on my perfection or on your perfection and on us getting it right all the time. We have a God who is relentless in sowing the seeds of Jesus' presence into the very fabric of the world. In a few moments, we are going to sing the song, Lord, Let My Heart Be Good Soil. And this can be a prayer that we use where we realize that we're not perfect, but it is our prayer that we can be made good soil, that we can be open to the seed of God's word, that God will keep being at work in us and never give up.